Today's lesson is 13.2, multiplying a fraction by a whole number using models. The objective for today is that I will multiply a whole number in a fraction to solve problems. First, we have a little review of what we learned in our previous lesson of multiplying a whole number times a unit fraction. So if I'm looking at 4/5, I would like you to do these with me in your notes. If I'm looking at 4/5, I can multiply 4 times a unit fraction of 1/5. So unit fraction is one part of the whole. Whatever the denominator is, that part does not change in my answers. So if I look at 5/8, I'm multiplying 5 times 1/8. So it's one part times the whole section of 5. Next one, I have 3 times the unit fraction of 1/7. This next one, I have my 4 times the unit fraction of 1/5, because the denominator piece does not change. Now the first problem we're looking at today says how much orange juice is needed for a group of 4 people if each person gets 1/3 cup of juice. Well, so for this one, what I think would be helpful is to draw some sort of a visual to help us to see what this would look like. So we have 4 people that are going to each get 1/3 cup of juice. I could draw out my visual. So if I'm drawing out thirds, I've got 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Well, I know that if I'm separating into thirds, these have to be separated into thirds. So I'm using a total of 4 of them. So I could actually multiply 4 times 1/3. So I leave my denominator part the same. That just remains over in my answer, and I only multiply my big number times my top number, so 4 times 1 would give me 4. And if I think about what I would see here, if I just use my visual to write an improper fraction, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts that are all separated into thirds. Next thing we're going to look at is thinking about what would happen if we looked at how much orange juice is needed if they each get 2/3 of juice. So they're going to end up having 2 times as much as they did originally. So again, on this one, let's include drawing a visual. So I have 4 girls, or 4 people, not necessarily girls, 4 people that are each getting 2/3. So I'm looking at my visual right here, and each of these, there's 2/3 in each one of my little sections that I'm boxing off right now. So those go to the 1, 2, 3, 4 people who are there. So now I have to think about a way that I could actually multiply this together, because I could do repeated addition. So I could do 2/3 plus 2/3 plus 2/3 plus 2/3. Okay, well that's what I see here, because I see 2/3 plus this 2/3 plus this 2/3 plus this 2/3. So I could do repeated addition. The denominators are all the same, so I would add my top number, 2, 4, 6, 8, so I'd end up with 8/3. Well, then another way that I could do that, I could look at what I have here. I'm using 8 sections because each one gets twice as much, and there's 4 people. So I have 8 times 1/3. So I could do 8 times 1/3, multiply 8 times 1 and get 8. Denominator doesn't change. Now I know how to change that into a mixed number as well. 3 goes into 8 2 times. Then I subtract out 2 groups of 3, 2 left over with 3 remaining. So they'd have 2 2/3 cups of juice for all of the 4 people if they each had 2/3 of juice. Let's take a look at this question. Kelly lives 1/4 of a mile from school. If she walks to and from school each day, how far does she walk during a school week? Show with a picture. So with our picture, what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating this table to put our information in. So we know that she goes to school 1/4 of a mile. She also goes home going 1/4 of a mile. Again, same thing on Tuesday. Same thing for both the morning and afternoon. So in your notes, I do want you to include this chart with the equation that we're going to set up as well. So I know for a total of 5 days, she is going for 2/4 of a mile. The reason that I know that each day she goes 2/4 is because I do remember what I did with adding fraction. When my denominator is the same, that stays the same, and all I do is add my numerator. So 2 plus 2, keep my denominator the same. So when I multiply a fraction times a whole number, I leave my denominator the same, so that stays the same and I don't mess with it. And I only multiply my big number and my top number, so 5 times 2 would give me 10/4. So then, what I would need to do is figure out, well, what do I have here? 10/4. I have 10/4. I can write that as a mixed number. So I would do 10 divided by 4. It goes in 2 times, and I'd subtract out and have 2 left over. So when I write that as a fraction, each week she is walking 2 2/4 miles. Because I do know how to simplify, if I also could simplify, because I know 2 is half of 4, it would be 2.5 miles as well. So, I wrote 1/4. You hopefully saw my mistake. So 2/4, if I divided both the top and the bottom by 2, would give me an answer of 2.5 miles. We're going to do number 1 together, and then I'm going to have you try number 2 in your notes on your own. So write down the multiplication equation with a whole number and a fraction of each picture. So on this one, I'm looking at number 1, and I have 2 pieces of each one of these pies. So I've got to figure out what the fractional piece would be. So I see that it's separated into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, separated into 6. So each part of the pie I have 1/6. So I'm trying to figure out how many total pieces I have. So there's 2 pieces over here and 2 pieces over here. So I have 4 pieces of my 1/6. So if I multiplied that, I would end up with 4 times 1, which would give me 4, keeping my denominator the same. So I could multiply, or I could simplify, because 4, 6, both the top and the bottom can be divided by 2. So when I simplify, 4 divided by 2 would give me 2. 6 divided by 2 would give me 3. So I know that for this one, the final answer would be 4 times 1/6 equals 4/6, or 2/3. You could also look at this and see that I have 2 pie pans, and within each pie pan, I have 2 6 represented. If I did it this way, I would still end up with my same answer of 4/6. So there are 2 different ways to solve this type of problem. Looking at number 2, I have to figure out how many steps I'm going each time. So it looks like I'm going 1/3, 2/3 each time. And how many hops did I make? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I want you to give me your answer. Simplify if possible.